Tell your life in Spanish. Building fluency through anecdotes. Have you noticed how some people are just really good storytellers? They can take the most mundane story, something completely ordinary, and tell it in such a magical way that everyone in the room is hanging on every word. Well, these people are often called raconteurs or a raconteur. And in this video, we're going to look at how you can become a little raconteur as well. Not just in your native language, but in the language you're learning too. If you've learnt anything with 3-minute languages before, you might recognise this technique. I often refer to it as building motors. Motors are short, reusable sentences or paragraphs that help you to motor along when you're speaking in the target language. In the early stages, these motors are things like introducing yourself or asking somebody how they are, but as you become more confident, your motors can grow. They can become longer, or they can turn into anecdotes, personal stories that you can practice and polish and tell again and again. Why is this helpful? Because these stories give you something real to say. Instead of relying on small talk or random phrases, you have little rehearsed bits of language ready to go. Stories that you've crafted and that mean something to you, and that you've written using real vocabulary in real context. And when you learn new vocabulary in context, especially when you know that you're going to use it, you're much more likely to remember it. And here's something even better. As you become more confident at writing these little anecdotes, something magical starts to happen. You begin to pull bits from them, and you don't always have to tell the full story. You might just reuse one sentence here or a phrase there, and suddenly you've got this toolbox of real, natural expressions that you can use in everyday conversations. Maybe a sentence that you wrote in a story about your dog becomes the perfect thing to say to somebody when they ask you about your weekend. Or a phrase from a story about a restaurant mix-up can help you when you're actually in a restaurant abroad. And that's when you go from being a learner to a real conversationalist. You don't just know the words, you know how to use them. So in this video, I'm going to show you 2 very short anecdotes, just 2 little things that happened to me with my son Kayden. We'll write them out in Spanish, and I'll walk you through the process so that you can see how I turn real experiences into reusable stories. Then we'll take a closer look at the vocabulary and structures I used, so you can build your own motors too. I hope you enjoy it. What is an anecdote? Well, an anecdote is basically when you tell somebody something that happened in your life. It's usually short, a bit interesting, and often slightly amusing. You don't have to be a comedian, just keep it light-hearted and personal. I have a 4-year-old son called Kayden, and he does a lot of funny things pretty much every day. I try to remember as many of them as I can, and usually there'll be 1 or 2 moments each week that make people chuckle when I tell them, and those become my little informal anecdotes. For example, now that Kayden's getting older, he's starting to become much more diplomatic, and he's learning how to talk to people in just the right way to get what he wants. His favourite food at the moment is cheesy bean wraps, which he first had at school. He came home one day and told me about them, and asked if I could make one. My first attempt didn't go so well, but Kayden was very kind about it and said, "Papa, you did it nearly right, but you put the beans on first and it should be cheese first, but that's okay because it's your first time." So diplomatic. I've told that story a few times now in English, but what if I wanted to say it in Spanish? To start with, let's write out the whole anecdote in English and really get it concise and polished. When you do this for your own anecdotes, just imagine you're telling your friend what happened. You want it to be very conversational, something like this. Well, Kayden's getting quite diplomatic these days. His favourite food at the minute is cheesy bean wraps. He had them at school and then asked for them at home, and I had no idea what they were, so I asked his dinner lady how to make them, and she said, cheese, beans, in a wrap. And I thought, goodness, I better write this recipe down. So I made him one at home. I got out a wrap, put some cheese on it, poured on the beans and rolled it up. Kayden took a bite and said, "Papa, you did it nearly right, but you put the cheese on first and it should be the beans first. But that's okay because it's your first time." He's so diplomatic. Now let's try and translate that into Spanish. I'll show you how I would say it in full first, and then we can go through it step by step to see what we can learn from it. Kayden se está volviendo bastante diplomático últimamente. Su comida favorita ahora mismo son los wraps de queso con alubias. Los probó en el colegio y luego los pidió en casa. Yo no tenía ni idea de lo que eran, así que le pregunté a las señoras del comedor cómo se hacen. Y me dijo, queso, alubias en una tortilla. Y pensé, oye, mejor apunto esta receta. Le preparé uno en casa. Cogí una tortilla, le puse queso, le eché las alubias y lo enrollé. Kayden dio un mordisco y me dijo, papá, casi lo hiciste bien, pero pusiste el queso primero y deberían ir las alubias primero. Pero no pasa nada, porque es tu primera vez. Tan diplomático. Let's go through the English anecdote line by line and see how I translated it into Spanish. Kayden's getting quite diplomatic these days. So the first bit is Kayden's getting. The word get is probably one of the hardest words to translate into Spanish because it can mean so many different things. Look at these sentences, for instance. I'm getting angry. I'm getting a dog. I'm getting married. I'm getting up. I'm getting ready. The word get changes its meaning slightly in each sentence, and in Spanish we don't have a single word that works in all of these situations. We have to pick a verb that matches the meaning. So I'm getting angry, me estoy enfadando. I'm getting a dog, voy a tener un perro. I'm getting married, me voy a casar. I'm getting up, me levanto. I'm getting ready, me estoy preparando. So Kayden's getting diplomatic actually means that he's becoming diplomatic. And if you want to say become in Spanish, you can use the verb volverse. Volverse. Volverse plus an adjective means to become or to get that adjective. For example, él se está volviendo muy impaciente. Él se está volviendo muy impaciente. He's getting very impatient. Ella se ha vuelto mucho más relajada. Ella se ha vuelto mucho más relajada. She's becoming much more relaxed. Con los años me he vuelto más introvertido. Con los años me he vuelto más introvertido. Over the years I've become more introverted. Mi perro se vuelve loco cuando ve una ardilla. Mi perro se vuelve loco cuando ve una ardilla. My dog goes crazy when he sees a squirrel. Ella se volvió adicta a las novelas policíacas. Ella se volvió adicta a las novelas policíacas. She became addicted to crime novels. So that's why we say, Kayden se está volviendo diplomático. Kayden se está volviendo diplomático. Kayden is getting diplomatic, or Kayden is becoming diplomatic. The word diplomatic in Spanish is simply diplomático. But actually, it's useful to point out that adjectives that end in IC in English tend to end in ico in Spanish. For example, chaotic, caótico. Romantic, romántico. Basic, básico. Historic, histórico. Athletic, atlético. Economic, económico. So that's a useful rule to know to give an instant boost to your Spanish vocabulary. Now, in the English, I said, Kayden's getting quite diplomatic. The word for quite in Spanish is bastante. Bastante. Estoy bastante cansado. Estoy bastante cansado. I'm quite tired. Hace bastante frío hoy. Hace bastante frío hoy. It's quite cold today. Es bastante caro. Es bastante caro. It's quite expensive. And then at the end of the sentence, we have these days. Kayden's getting quite diplomatic these days. Now, the literal translation of these days is en estos días. En estos días. If you used it, you'll be perfectly understood and it's a fine choice. However, I did say I wanted my anecdote to be quite conversational and informal. And a more common way of saying these days is the word últimamente. Últimamente. It means recently or lately. Últimamente. Últimamente duermo mal. Últimamente duermo mal. I've been sleeping badly recently. Ha estado lloviendo mucho últimamente. Ha estado lloviendo mucho últimamente. It's been raining a lot lately. Últimamente, María come principalmente comida vegana. Últimamente, María come principalmente comida vegana. These days, Maria eats mainly vegan food. So the Spanish version of the sentence, Kayden's getting quite diplomatic these days, is Kayden se está volviendo bastante diplomático últimamente. The next bit is much simpler. His favourite food at the minute is cheesy bean wraps. His favourite food is su comida favorita. Su comida favorita. You can put the word favorita after any noun to say your favourite. Mi película favorita es El Diablo Viste de Prada. Mi película favorita es El Diablo Viste de Prada. My favourite film is The Devil Wears Prada. Tu canción favorita siempre suena en el coche. Tu canción favorita siempre suena en el coche. Your favorite song is always playing in the car. Nuestra ciudad favorita es París. Nuestra ciudad favorita es París. Our favorite city is Paris. La asignatura favorita de Pedro es arte. La asignatura favorita de Pedro es arte. Pedro's favorite subject is art. Su palabra favorita en español es churro. Su palabra favorita en español es churro. Their favorite word in Spanish is churro. You could change it to menos favorito to mean least favorite. Mi comida menos favorito son los guisantes. Mi comida menos favorito son los guisantes. My least favorite food is peas. ¿Cuál es tu asignatura menos favorita? ¿Cuál es tu asignatura menos favorita? What's your least favorite subject? So in the anecdote it says his favorite food at the minute. And to say at the minute in Spanish, you can say ahora mismo. Ahora mismo. Ahora mismo is a lovely phrase that means right now or at the minute. And it's a very common phrase that you'll hear in everyday Spanish. Está viendo la tele ahora mismo. Está viendo la tele ahora mismo. He's watching TV at the minute. Ahora mismo no tengo hambre. Ahora mismo no tengo hambre. I'm not hungry at the minute. Puedes hablar ahora mismo. Puedes hablar ahora mismo. Can you talk right now? The sentence goes on to say his favourite food at the minute is cheesy bean wraps. Cheesy bean wraps. How on earth do you say that in Spanish? Well, you would simply switch it round and say wraps of cheese with beans, which is los wraps de queso con alubias. Los wraps de queso con alubias. The Spanish do have the word tortillas, which actually refers to the bread itself. But if we're talking about the rolled up tortillas filled with delights, then you can say wrap. Voy a pedir un wrap de pollo. Voy a pedir un wrap de pollo. I'm going to order a chicken wrap. And actually, in Spain, the word tortilla means omelette. So you can order una tortilla española and you'll get a Spanish omelette. So the full sentence is, his favourite food at the minute is cheesy bean wraps. Su comida favorita ahora mismo son los wraps de queso con alubias. Su comida favorita ahora mismo son los wraps de queso con alubias. Why do we say son, which means are, when the English sentence says is? We say his favourite food at the minute is cheesy bean wraps. Well, it's because los wraps is plural. If you rearrange the English sentence slightly, it might make more sense. Instead of saying his favourite food is wraps, think of it as wraps are his favourite food. Los wraps son su comida favorita. Los wraps son su comida favorita. And in Spanish, you can change the sentence around. Su comida favorita son los wraps. Now, the next sentence is, he had them at school and then asked for them at home. So let's split it into two halves. The first half is, he had them at school. He had in Spanish is tuvo, tuvo. But when you're talking about food, a better way would be to simply say, he ate them at school. However, because I'm talking about the first time he had them, I think I'll say he tried them at school. Los probó en el colegio. Los probó en el colegio. He tried them at school. You'll notice that them is los, and it goes in front of the verb. Los probó. You can put los in front of any verb. Los comió. Los comió. He ate them. Los encontré. Los encontré. I found them. Los compramos. Los compramos. We bought them. And en el colegio is at school, or literally in the school. The second half of the sentence is, and then asked for them at home. Then, in Spanish, is luego. Luego, which could also mean later. And for he asked for them, we can use the verb pedir. Pedir, which means to ask for, or literally to order. And again, we can put los in front of the verb. Los pidió. Los pidió. He asked for them. The tense for pidió, and also for probó, is the preterite tense. I won't go into a big explanation about the preterite tense here, or this video would drag on for hours. But basically, you'll notice that if you want to say he or she did something, the verb tends to end in o with an accent. Habló. Habló means he spoke or she spoke. Bailó. Bailó. He danced or she danced. Comió. Comió. He ate or she ate. Finally, to say at home, you say en casa. En casa. So the sentence is, he had them at school and then asked for them at home. Los probó en el colegio y luego los pidió en casa. Los probó en el colegio y luego los pidió en casa. The next bit is, I had no idea what they were. I had no idea is no tenía ni idea. No tenía ni idea. Literally, all you need is no tenía idea. No tenía idea. But the little word ni just makes it sound a little more natural and idiomatic. The word ni is small but powerful. It sort of means not even, and you can use it with no. For example, no dijo ni una palabra. No dijo ni una palabra. He didn't even say a single word. No tengo ni un euro. No tengo ni un euro. I don't even have €1. Ni lo conozco. Ni lo conozco. I don't even know him. So, no tenía ni idea means I had no idea, or I didn't have a clue. So I say I had no idea what they were. No tenía ni idea de lo que eran. No tenía ni idea de lo que eran. So firstly, why do we need de? The word de means of or about. And if you think about the sentence, what you're saying is that you had no clue as to what they were, or you had no idea about what they were. So we use de. No tenía ni idea de lo que eran. Now, to say what they were, we have to think about the word what. And in a question, the word what is generally que. But when the word what appears in the middle of a sentence, instead we say lo que in Spanish. Lo que. No comprendo lo que dices. No comprendo lo que dices. I don't understand what you're saying. El supermercado no tiene lo que necesito. El supermercado no tiene lo que necesito. The supermarket doesn't have what I need. Eso no es lo que dije. Eso no es lo que dije. That's not what I said. So when what appears in the middle of a sentence, we say lo que. And finally, eran means they were, eran. So let's put it all together. I had no idea what they were. No tenía ni idea de lo que eran. No tenía ni idea de lo que eran. I then go on to say, so I asked his dinner lady how to make them. The word así is such a useful word. Así. And it's probably my favourite word in Spanish. Although I'm pretty sure I've said that about at least 5 other words before, but right now, así is my favourite. Así can mean like this, or like that, or in this way. That's how, or literally thus. Es así. Es así. It's like this. Así es. Así es. That's right. No se hace así. No se hace así. That's not how you do it. ¿Por qué lo hiciste así? ¿Por qué lo hiciste así? Why did you do it like that? Y así fue como pasó. Y así fue como pasó. And that's how it happened. You can change it slightly to así que, and then it means so or therefore. Así que. Estaba lloviendo, así que no salimos. Estaba lloviendo, así que no salimos. It was raining, so we didn't go out. No había leche, así que tomé café solo. No había leche, así que tomé café solo. There wasn't any milk, so I had black coffee. Me encanta este libro, así que voy a comprar otro del mismo autor. Me encanta este libro, así que voy a comprar otro del mismo autor. I love this book, so I'm going to buy another from the same author. So in the sentence we say, so I asked the dinner lady. Well, we've already had the verb to ask for, which was pedir. But this isn't to ask for, this is simply to ask, as in to ask a question. I asked a question to the dinner lady. The verb to ask, as in to ask a question, is preguntar. Preguntar. So pedir means to ask for something, whereas preguntar means to ask a question. Let's compare some sentences using pedir and preguntar. Le pedí un café. Le pedí un café. I asked him for a coffee. Voy a pedir la cuenta. Voy a pedir la cuenta. I'm going to ask for the bill. Nos pidió ayuda. Nos pidió ayuda. She asked us for help. And then with preguntar, le pregunté la hora. Le pregunté la hora. I asked her the time. Voy a preguntar dónde está. Voy a preguntar dónde está. I'm going to ask where it is. ¿Puedo preguntarte algo? ¿Puedo preguntarte algo? Can I ask you something? So when I say, I asked the dinner lady, we would say, pregunté a la señora del comedor. Pregunté a la señora del comedor. Let's look at that again. Pregunté a la señora del comedor. Why do we need that little a? The personal a. In Spanish, you have to put the little word a in front of people if they're the object of a sentence. We don't have an equivalent in English, it's only a Spanish thing. Veo a María. Veo a María. I see Maria. Ayudamos a los niños. Ayudamos a los niños. We're helping the children. Escuché a mi amigo. Escuché a mi amigo. I listened to my friend. Llamé a mi madre. Llamé a mi madre. I called my mum. And you only do it in front of people, or some people use them in front of pets as well. You don't need the personal a in front of inanimate objects. Veo el coche. Veo el coche. I see the car. Escuché la radio. Escuché la radio. I listened to the radio. Llamé Madrid. Llamé Madrid. I called Madrid. So pregunté a la señora del comedor means I asked the dinner lady. And we use the personal a because dinner lady is a person. Pregunté a la señora del comedor. And then at the end, I say, I asked the dinner lady how to make them. We won't translate this literally. Instead, we can say how they're made, which is cómo se hacen. Cómo se hacen. You could translate it literally, and that's absolutely fine. It would be cómo hacerlos. Cómo is how, hacer to make, and the los on the end is them. Cómo hacerlos, how to make them. But using the expression se hacen sounds much more Spanish. Se hacen is a type of phrase called an impersonal passive phrase, and it's extremely common and very natural in Spanish. You put the little word se in front of a verb, and it means that it's being done. You don't have to use it, but it's a very common way of speaking in Spanish. Look at these example sentences. Firstly, I'll give you the literal translation, which is perfectly fine to use, I hasten to add, and then the more natural way using the impersonal passive. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it. So a literal translation would be no sé cómo hacerlo. No sé cómo hacerlo. And this is a fine way of saying it. No sé cómo hacerlo is perfectly acceptable. But using the impersonal passive, you would say instead, no sé cómo se hace. No sé cómo se hace. So you put that little se in front of the verb. No sé cómo se hace means I don't know how it's done. So you can use se hace to mean that something is done or something is made. For example, no sé cómo se hace un cappuccino. No sé cómo se hace un cappuccino. I don't know how to make a cappuccino, or I don't know how a cappuccino is made. No sé cómo se hace una tarta. No sé cómo se hace una tarta. I don't know how to make a cake, or literally I don't know how a cake is made. Another example is, how do you say it in Spanish? How do you say it in Spanish? A literal translation would be, ¿Cómo lo dices en español? ¿Cómo lo dices en español? But using the impersonal passive, you might say, ¿Cómo se dice en español? ¿Cómo se dice en español? How is it said in Spanish? So, ¿cómo se dice means how is it said. ¿Cómo se dice hello en español? ¿Cómo se dice hello en español? How do you say hello in Spanish? Or, ¿cómo se dice todo en inglés? ¿Cómo se dice todo en inglés? How do you say todo in English? Another example is, do they sell them here? Do they sell them here? So literally you would say, los venden aquí. Los venden aquí. But the impersonal passive way would be, se venden aquí. Se venden aquí. You can put any noun after se venden to say that they're sold here. For example, se venden coches aquí. Se venden coches aquí. Do you sell cars here? Se venden uvas. Se venden uvas. Do you sell grapes? Another example would be, you cook it like this. You cook it like this. Literally, it would be, lo cocinas así. Lo cocinas así. But using the impersonal passive, you would say, se cocina así. Se cocina así. So, se cocina means it's cooked. For example, la paella se cocina así. La paella se cocina así. You cook paella like this, or paella is cooked like this. Se cocina el pollo así. Se cocina el pollo así. You cook chicken like this, or chicken is cooked like this. Se cocina el pollo así. Another example is, they use it a lot in Spanish cooking. They use it a lot in Spanish cooking. Literally, you would say, lo usan mucho en la cocina española. Lo usan mucho en la cocina española. But an impersonal passive way of saying it would be, se usa mucho en la cocina española. Se usa mucho en la cocina española. Literally, it is used a lot in Spanish cooking. So you could say things like, el ajo se usa mucho en la cocina española. El ajo se usa mucho en la cocina española. Garlic is used a lot in Spanish cooking. Or el aceite de oliva se usa muchísimo. El aceite de oliva se usa muchísimo. Olive oil is used a lot. But anyway, that was the impersonal passive. Don't worry about it too much, but it's nice to know. But now, back to my favourite subject, me. I said I had no idea what they were, so I asked his dinner lady how to make them. And we now know that we say, no tenía ni idea de lo que eran. Así que pregunté a la señora del comedor cómo se hacen. No tenía ni idea de lo que eran. Así que pregunté a la señora del comedor cómo se hacen. Now, a Spanish native speaker might hear that sentence and think, there's something missing. In Spanish, if I wanted to say, I asked the dinner lady, I should really say, I asked her, the dinner lady. The word her in this sense is le. So you would say, le pregunté a la señora del comedor. Le pregunté a la señora del comedor. I asked her, the dinner lady. The little word le is an object pronoun, meaning him or her, and in English, we don't need it if we have the actual noun. But in Spanish, the word le tends to be thrown in anyway, and it's referred to as the redundant object pronoun. It's not vital, but a sentence sounds a little odd without it. Le dije a mi hermano que no podía venir. Le dije a mi hermano que no podía venir. I told him, my brother, that he couldn't come. In English, we would just say, I told my brother that he couldn't come. Les envié un mensaje a mis padres. Les envié un mensaje a mis padres. I sent a message to them, my parents. But in English, we just say, I sent a message to my parents. Le di el libro a Ana. Le di el libro a Ana. I gave the book to her, Anna. So in English, we would tend to say just, I gave the book to Anna. In English, we tend to drop the him or her if we have the name or the noun, but in Spanish, they leave it in. Again, this is not something that you need to worry about really. You will still be perfectly understood without these redundant object pronouns, but to sound authentically Spanish, start sprinkling them in here and there, and eventually you'll get a flair for them. So the final sentence is, no tenía ni idea de lo que eran, así que le pregunté a la señora del comedor cómo se hacen. No tenía ni idea de lo que eran, así que le pregunté a la señora del comedor cómo se hacen. I had no idea what they were, so I asked his dinner lady how to make them. The next bit is when the dinner lady explained the process of making this complex dish to me. She told me cheese, beans, in a wrap. In Spanish we say, ella me dijo queso, alubias en una tortilla. This sentence is simple enough and pretty much a direct translation from the English. The next bit is, I thought, I better write this recipe down. In Spanish you would say, pensé hoy, mejor apunto esta receta. Pensé hoy, mejor apunto esta receta. The word mejor means better, but you can use it by itself just to imply it's better if, or it's better that. Mejor no digo nada. Mejor no digo nada. It's better if I say nothing. Mejor esperamos. Mejor esperamos. It's better if we wait, or we better wait. Mejor no lo toques. Mejor no lo toques. You'd better not touch it. So, mejor apunto means I'd better write down. The verb apuntar means to write down or to make a note. Voy a apuntar tu número. Voy a apuntar tu número. I'm going to write down your number. ¿Dónde apunto esto? ¿Dónde apunto esto? Where should I write this down? Apunté la dirección en mi cuaderno. Apunté la dirección en mi cuaderno. I wrote the address in my notebook. Now you could use the verb escribir, but that's more to write than to note down. It still works the same though, it's just a little more about writing in a fuller sense rather than jotting something down. And finally, esta receta means this recipe. And this reminds me of when I was living in Spain many years ago. I was teaching at a university and a group of the teachers and I went out for an informal meeting to a restaurant. We just paid for our meal, but we needed to get a receipt because the university was covering our expenses. I meant to ask for a receipt, but I said, ¿Nos puede dar una receta, por favor? ¿Nos puede dar una receta, por favor? I'd mixed up receta, which means recipe, and recibo, which means receipt. The poor waiter looked at us and said, ¿Para quién? For whom? Para todos. For everybody. Sí, pero ¿para qué comida? Yes, but for which meal? ¿Para todas las comidas? For all the meals? He said, ¿Quieres una receta para todas las comidas? So he asked me, you want a recipe for all of the meals? And I said, sí, por favor, si está bien. Yes, please, if that's okay. Bueno, puedo preguntarle al chef, pero no sé si hace ese tipo de cosas. Well, I can ask the chef, but I'm not sure he does that sort of thing. Vale, es que lo necesitamos para nuestro jefe, porque él paga la cuenta. I said, okay, well, we just need it for our employer because he's paying for the bill. Ah, no receta, recibo. He said, oh, not recipe, no receta, recibo, receipt. I was so embarrassed, but I never mixed up receta and recibo again. Una receta is a recipe and un recibo is a receipt. So, ¿me puede dar el recibo, por favor? ¿Me puede dar el recibo, por favor? Can you give me the receipt, please? So that's what I should have asked for. He perdido el recibo, así que no puedo devolverlo. He perdido el recibo, así que no puedo devolverlo. I've lost the receipt, so I can't return it. ¿Necesitas un recibo? ¿Necesitas un recibo? Do you need a receipt? But then receta means recipe. For example, ¿tienes la receta de esa tarta de limón? ¿Tienes la receta de esa tarta de limón? Do you have the recipe for that lemon cake? Mi abuela me dio su receta secreta de gazpacho. Mi abuela me dio su receta secreta de gazpacho. My grandma gave me her secret gazpacho recipe. So far in the anecdote we have Kayden se está volviendo bastante diplomático últimamente. Su comida favorita ahora mismo son los wraps de queso con alubias. Los probó en el colegio y luego los pidió en casa. Yo no tenía ni idea de lo que eran, así que le pregunté a la señora del comedor cómo se hacen, y me dijo, queso, alubias, en una tortilla. Y pensé, oye, mejor apunto esta receta. So hopefully you got the gist of that, but if not, here's the English. Kayden's getting quite diplomatic these days. His favourite food at the minute is cheesy bean wraps. He had them at school and then asked for them at home. I had no idea what they were, so I asked his dinner lady how to make them, and she said, cheese, beans, in a wrap. I thought, I better write that recipe down. Next, I go on to say, I made him one at home, which is, le preparé uno en casa. Le preparé uno en casa. A pretty simple translation. You can see that little word le again, although this time it's not redundant. It means I made him one at home. Le preparé uno en casa. I then go on to describe how I made his wrap. I got out a wrap, put on some cheese, poured on the beans, and rolled it up. Let's break this complex recipe down into steps. Step 1, I got out a wrap. Cogí una tortilla. Cogí una tortilla. The verb coger means to grab, or to catch, or to get, or even to pick up. Cogí un taxi. Cogí un taxi. I caught a taxi. ¿Puedes coger el teléfono? ¿Puedes coger el teléfono? Can you get the phone? Voy a coger algo de comer. Voy a coger algo de comer. I'm going to grab something to eat. Just note, though, that in Latin America, the verb coger can also have quite a rude slang meaning. So people there tend to use tomar instead. Step 2, I put on some cheese. Le puse queso. Le puse queso. The little word le here is sort of like on it, but it could also be translated as for him, meaning I put some cheese on for him. Le puse queso. Puse is the preterite of poner, meaning to put. Le puse azúcar al café. Le puse azúcar al café. I put sugar in the coffee. Le puse salsa a la pizza. Le puse salsa a la pizza. I put sauce on the pizza. Le puse una nota en la mochila. Le puse una nota en la mochila. I put a note in his bag. Step 3, I poured on the beans. Le eché las alubias. Le eché las alubias. Again, the little le here is sort of like on it, but equally it could be saying for him. The verb echar means to pour or to add or also to throw on. Echa un poco de sal. Echa un poco de sal. Add a bit of salt. Le echo pimienta. Le echo pimienta. Shall I add pepper? Eché aceite en el sartén. Eché aceite en el sartén. I poured oil into the frying pan. And then step 4, I rolled it up. Lo enrollé. Lo enrollé. This is quite a simple instruction. The verb enrollar means to roll something up. Enrollé el póster y lo guardé en el tubo. Enrollé el póster y lo guardé en el tubo. I rolled up the poster and put it in the tube. ¿Puedes enrollar la alfombra? ¿Puedes enrollar la alfombra? Can you roll up the rug? Después de preparar el burrito, lo enrollé bien. Después de preparar el burrito, lo enrollé bien. After making the burrito, I rolled it up nicely. So that's how I did it. Cogí una tortilla, le puse queso, le eché las alubias y lo enrollé. But then Kayden took a bite. Kayden dio un mordisco. The phrase dar un mordisco means to take a bite. Dio un mordisco a la manzana. Dio un mordisco a la manzana. He took a bite of the apple. Le dio un mordisco al bocadillo y sonrió. Le dio un mordisco al bocadillo y sonrió. He took a bite of the sandwich and smiled. Probó la tarta y solo dio un mordisco. Probó la tarta y solo dio un mordisco. He tried the cake and only took one bite. And said, y me dijo, and here comes Kayden's diplomatic response, Papa, you did it nearly right. Papa, casi lo hiciste bien. Papa, casi lo hiciste bien. The word casi means nearly or almost, and it tends to go in front of the verb in Spanish. Casi me olvido. Casi me olvido. I almost forgot. Casi me caigo. Casi me caigo. I nearly fell. Casi llegamos tarde. Casi llegamos tarde. We almost arrived late. Casi nunca como carne. Casi nunca como carne. I almost never eat meat. Casi todo el mundo estaba allí. Casi todo el mundo estaba allí. Almost everyone was there. So Kayden says, casi lo hiciste bien. Now, lo hiciste means you did it, and bien here means right or well. So you did it right, or you almost did it right. Bien is a very common word in Spanish, and it's good to learn the difference between bien and bueno. Mainly, bien is an adverb, so it describes when you've done something well, whereas bueno is an adjective, so it describes nouns that are good. Es un libro bueno. Es un libro bueno. It's a good book. Ella es muy buena en su trabajo. Ella es muy buena en su trabajo. She's very good at her job. Está buena la comida. Está buena la comida. Is the food good? But then bien is an adverb. Lo hiciste bien. Lo hiciste bien. You did it right. Habla español muy bien. Habla español muy bien. He speaks Spanish very well. ¿Estás bien? ¿Estás bien? Are you okay? So Kayden said, casi lo hiciste bien, but you put the cheese on first. Pero pusiste el queso primero. but you put the cheese on first. Pero pusiste el queso primero. So in the step-by-step instructions, we saw puse queso, meaning I put on cheese, and now pusiste means you put on. So pusiste el queso, you put the cheese on. The word primero simply means first. For example, primero ponemos el queso. Primero ponemos el queso. First we put the cheese on. Primero fui al supermercado. Primero fui al supermercado. First I went to the supermarket. Primero se echan los huevos, luego la leche. Primero se echan los huevos, luego la leche. First you add the eggs, then the milk. That last example has the impersonal passive, the eggs are added. Se echan los huevos. Kayden then clarifies with, and it should be the beans first. The word should in Spanish is debería. Deberías probar este plato. Deberías probar este plato. You should try this dish. Deberíamos salir ya. Deberíamos salir ya. We should leave now. Deberían avisarnos si llegan tarde. Deberían avisarnos si llegan tarde. They should let us know if they're running late. Now, in the advice about the beans, Kayden's saying the beans should go first. Deberían ir las alubias primero. Deberían ir las alubias primero. The beans should go first, or literally, should go, deberían ir, the beans first, las alubias primero. And it's quite common in Spanish to put the noun after the verb, even if it's not a question. For example, llegó el autobús. Llegó el autobús. The bus arrived. Faltan dos personas. Faltan dos personas. Two people are missing. Van primero los ingredientes secos. Van primero los ingredientes secos. The dry ingredients go first. Finally, he showered me with reassurance when he said, but that's okay because it's your first time. Now the phrase no pasa nada, is a lovely phrase in Spanish that you'll hear all the time in Spain. It means that's okay, or it's no big deal, or don't worry about it. Literally, it means nothing happens, from the verb pasar, meaning to happen. ¿Qué pasa? ¿Qué pasa? Means what's happening. ¿Qué pasó ayer? ¿Qué pasó ayer? What happened yesterday? Nada malo va a pasar. Nada malo va a pasar. Nothing bad is going to happen. Si algo pasa, llámame. Si algo pasa, llámame. If something happens, call me. And finally, because it's your first time in Spanish is ¿por qué es tu primera vez? Porque es tu primera vez. The word vez means time, as in occurrence, or how many times something happens, and it's a feminine noun. So la vez means the time, or una vez is one time or once. Muchas veces, many times. Es mi primera vez. Es mi primera vez. It's my first time. ¿Cuántas veces has estado en España? ¿Cuántas veces has estado en España? How many times have you been to Spain? La próxima vez, avísame. La próxima vez, avísame. Next time, let me know. So he said, but that's okay because it's your first time, which in Spanish is, pero no pasa nada porque es tu primera vez. Pero no pasa nada porque es tu primera vez. So diplomatic. Tan diplomático. The word tan means so. Estoy tan cansado. Estoy tan cansado. I'm so tired. Ella es tan simpática. Ella es tan simpática. She is so nice. Tan pronto que posible. Tan pronto que posible. As soon as possible. Or literally, so soon as possible. So let's have a look at the full anecdote in Spanish one last time. Kayden se está volviendo bastante diplomático últimamente. Su comida favorita ahora mismo son los wraps de queso con alubias. Los probó en el colegio y luego los pidió en casa. Yo no tenía ni idea de lo que eran, así que le pregunté a la señora del comedor cómo se hacen, y me dijo queso, alubias, en una tortilla. Y pensé, uy, mejor apunto esta receta. Le preparé uno en casa. Cogí una tortilla, le puse queso, le eché las alubias y lo enrollé. Kayden dio un mordisco y me dijo, papá, casi lo hiciste bien, pero pusiste el queso primero y deberían ir las alubias primero. Pero no pasa nada porque es tu primera vez. Tan diplomático. Let's have another go with another anecdote, and then you can try writing your own. Another funny little story I've been telling people is about Kayden's dance classes. He's been going for a few weeks now. It all started when he came out of school one day and said, Papa, all my friends are going to dance class. Can I go too? And I said, yes, of course. Before his first lesson, he was excited all day. He couldn't stop talking about it. And then we got there. We arrived at the studio and the door opened to reveal a gigantic, flamboyant man. He said, very dramatically, hello and welcome to dance class. Kayden took one look and said, I don't want to go in. And then he ran and hid in the corner. I said, are you sure? You've been excited all day. But he clearly didn't want to go in. So I said, okay, let's go home. But then the dance instructor stepped forward and said, may I tempt you inside with a scarf? And he pulled out a yellow silk scarf and started twirling it in the air like a ribbon. Kayden said, yes, you may, and he waltzed straight in. Now let me translate that into Spanish. We want to keep it casual and conversational, so here's how I'd say it if I were telling one of my Spanish friends. Kayden va ahora a clases de baile. Ya ha ido a unas 5. Todo empezó cuando un día salió del cole y me dijo, todos mis amigos van a clase de baile. ¿Puedo ir yo también? Y le dije, sí, claro. Antes de su primera clase, estuvo emocionadísimo todo el día. No paraba de hablar de ello. Y luego llegamos. Entramos en el estudio y la puerta se abrió para revelar a un hombre gigantesco y muy extravagante. Dijo con mucha dramatización, hola y bienvenido a la clase de baile. Kayden lo miró y dijo, no quiero entrar. Y se fue corriendo a esconderse en un rincón. Le dije, ¿estás seguro? ¿Has estado emocionado todo el día? Pero estaba claro que no quería entrar. Así que dije, vale, volvamos a casa. Pero el profesor de baile dio un paso adelante y dijo, ¿puedo tentarte con un pañuelo? Sacó un pañuelo de seda amarillo y lo hizo girar en el aire como una cinta. Kayden dijo, sí, puedes, y entró tan contento. Writing your own anecdotes. You don't have to write long stories like mine. Even short anecdotes, just a few lines, can make a huge difference when you're learning to speak a language. Try writing about something that happened to you this week. It doesn't need to be exciting or dramatic, something simple, like what you ate for lunch, a funny moment with a friend, or a little mistake you made while shopping. Once you've written it, read it out loud a few times. Then try telling it from memory without reading. This is one of the best ways to build fluency and confidence. You'll get more comfortable with sentence structure, word order, and pronunciation, and you'll have something to say when you need it. Because one of the biggest challenges in conversation is knowing what to say, if you've already practiced telling a little story, you'll be ready and you'll sound natural. So give it a go. Write a tiny anecdote or motor in your target language, practice it, and keep it in your back pocket for your next conversation. Here are a few ideas of things that you could write about. If you're in the earlier stages of language learning, try these. About me. Say your name and where you're from. Say something you like, a colour, a food, a place, or a person. Say something you don't like. Say one thing that you do every day. Say what time you usually get up or go to bed. Food. Say what time you ate today or yesterday. Say what your favourite food is. Say what you usually eat for breakfast. Say what drink you like. Say something you never eat. Daily routine. Say what you do in the morning. Say what you do at the weekend. Say what you do after work or school. Say what time you do something, for example, eat or sleep or study. Say one thing you always do and one thing you never do. Likes and feelings. Say what you love doing. Say what you hate doing. Say how you feel today, happy, tired, hungry. Say one thing that makes you smile. Say something that makes you bored or angry. Learning. Say why you're learning this language. Say when you started learning. Say what helps you learn. Say what you find easy, or say what you find difficult. Here are a few tips for beginners. Even if you can only write very short sentences, that's okay. The goal is to practice putting your thoughts into the language, even if it's simple. For example, me llamo Ana. Vivo en Londres. Me gusta el chocolate. No me gusta el café. That's already a great mini anecdote. If you're a more advanced language learner, you could try writing about some of these things. Everyday life. A small win or a challenge from your week. What you ate for breakfast or dinner. A moment when you got lost or took a wrong turn. A time you forgot something important. A funny or strange conversation that you overheard. People and pets. Something someone said that made you laugh. A moment with a pet or animal. A quirky habit your friend or family member has. What you were like as a child. A moment when someone helped you unexpectedly. Out and about. Something unusual that you saw in a cafe or a shop. An awkward moment in a restaurant. A strange item you found or bought. A time you ordered something and got the wrong thing. A moment when you didn't understand someone and guessed what they meant. Nice and simple. Your morning routine. What you normally do on Sundays. A hobby you enjoy and how you got into it. What you love or hate about your neighbourhood. A small joy from your day-to-day. Here are a few more tips. Keep it simple. Use vocabulary and grammar that you already know. Add 1 or 2 new words or structures to stretch yourself. Practice reading it aloud, and then try retelling it from memory. So, in this video, we looked at how writing little anecdotes, even just 1 or 2 sentences, can really help you to grow in confidence when you're learning a language. You don't need to tell long stories or be a natural storyteller, just start small. Write about something simple, and say it out loud, and then practice it until it feels like it's yours. The more you do it, the more natural your speaking will become, and the more fun you'll have with the language. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to learn more, then please consider giving it a like or subscribe to my channel. Also, you can check out the full 3-minute languages courses at www.3minlanguages.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Gracias.